Last time on Bleach, Thousand-Year Blood War, the Quincy's launched their attack on the Soul Reapers. While Naklavar and Grimjaw engage in a cat-and-mouse chase, Barro wreaks havoc upon the Soul Reapers with his deadly sniping. Amidst this, Renji comes across Ishida. The two are evenly matched up to a point until Ishida brings forth his new powers and decides the battle with an arrow through Renji's chest. Is there really no hope of redemption left from Ishida? Let's find out in Episode 8. Episode 8 begins with Ishida standing over a fallen Renji as Barro peers on from afar. Meanwhile, Kenpachi and Kurotsuchi's group come across Pernita Parnjas. Kenpachi wonders about the nature of the peculiar being in front of him and rushes him the very next second. Kurotsuchi tries to stop him, but by that point, Kenpachi had already jumped back. He was able to successfully land a blow on its head while suffering an injury to his right arm. Pernita then suddenly starts morphing and lets out whip-like protrusions from his body, leaving the two captains completely puzzled about what's happening. As they look on at the weirdly shaped Pernita, Kenpachi's injured arm starts twisting out of control all of a sudden. Kenpachi pulls his own arm off, and the infected arm continues to twist until it eventually bursts into a puddle of blood. Kurotsuchi praises Kenpachi's quick thinking, all the while making snarky comments as well, and asks Nemu to treat his injury. He then advises Kenpachi to refrain from taking the enemy head-on, but like talking to a wall, his words have no effect on him as he engages the mysterious enemy again. Kenpachi lands a blow on Pernita's head when abruptly his entire body starts cramping up like his arm before. Kurotsuchi impales him with his sword then, letting out the paralyzing scream of Ashisogi Jizo at fear level 4 for 4 seconds to completely paralyze Kenpachi. Kurotsuchi then deduces from the fact that Kenpachi remained immobile after he had paralyzed his body that Pernita's powers had something to do with controlling their enemy's nerves. Ikaku and Yumichika aren't surprised by Kurotsuchi's self-serving behavior as they taunt Nemu about her captain still being the same. Quincy's had the ability to convert the reishi in their surroundings by running it through their veins, so it doesn't surprise Kurotsuchi if one had the ability to control other parts using it as well. Kurotsuchi taunts Pernita by telling him now that he knows his powers, he has nothing to fear to incite an attack from him. He then throws acid on his nerves to put him into excruciating pain. Kurotsuchi then walks up to Kenpachi and justifies his actions by saying his sacrifice is necessary for them, as noble sacrifices lead to noble victories. Kenpachi stares at him, still able to move his eye. Kurotsuchi thanks Kenpachi for letting him learn about their enemy's powers, as well as letting him know his Ashisojizo wasn't strong enough yet, and needed improving for the next time he would have to use it on him. He then faces Pernita and tells him to offer himself up as his test subject, since their beloved captain had sacrificed so much already. Kurotsuchi's crude words infuriate Pernita as he suddenly starts morphing again, only to reveal a giant hand with a dual pupil eye in its center. It was the Soul King's left arm. Kurotsuchi verifies this, as its spiritual pressure was the same as that of Ukitake's, who had the Soul King's right arm's power. The enormous arm of the Soul King excites Kurotsuchi beyond compare, as he had found a test subject like none other before it. Unaware of the reasons why the Soul King's left arm was serving Ewok, Kurotsuchi gets corrected by the arm, which then speaks and tells him he was named Pernita Parnjas. Kurotsuchi, being Kurotsuchi, then starts babbling on about naming it or deciding the spelling of its name, which Pernita takes as an insult and attacks him by sending his nerves into the ground below and controlling it like living matter. Kurotsuchi dodges it and tries to get away by ziplining to a nearby building, but gets caught between two hands by Pernita. Around the same time, Bazard and the others get ready to engage the Quincy King in Hashwalth. Kurotsuchi manages to survive unharmed, with only his explosion-reactive motor going out. As he reaches the ground below, riddled with Pernita's nerves, he forms a Hirenkyaku, the aerial Hoho Ishida, and grandfather Suken named so. Kurotsuchi then throws an explosive soul at Pernita's finger. Ripping it off, he quickly pours a preservative on it to keep it fresh for later use. But the finger suddenly gains consciousness as well, and throws its nerves on his right hand. Kurotsuchi immediately realigns the blood vessels, muscles, and nerves in his hand by performing rapid one-hand surgery. Pernita then rips his own finger off, which starts turning into another hand automatically, to strengthen his forces against Kurotsuchi. Having read about the Soul King's left arm while he was young, getting to practically experience it right now really overjoys Kurotsuchi. He then unleashes his Bankai. Ikaku and Yumichika, aware of his highly toxic Bankai, quickly rush over to Kenpachi to get him out of the way, when Kurotsuchi tells them that wasn't the case this time, as he brings out his alternate Bankai, Matai Fukuin Shotai, a variant of Konjiki Ashisogizo, which had the ability to give birth to a new Ashisogijizo based on the current battle data. Covered in 70,000 layers of nerves on its exterior, Pernita has no luck in trying to control Ashisogijizo, as he only manages to peel one layer off at a time. Ashisogijizo then rushes the seemingly helpless Pernita in front of it and starts to spontaneously swallow all 3 of his arms whole. As Pernita struggles only to get devoured, Kurotsuchi lets out a villainous kind of laugh, now that his victory has been set in stone. Episode 9 starts off with Kurotsuchi stopping in the middle of his evil laugh, as suddenly, Pernita starts pouncing around viciously in Ashisogizo's body, and bursts out, exploding Ashisogijizo to bits and pieces. Urahara and Kiraku sense this drop in Kurotsuchi's spiritual pressure, although Urahara believes he must be alright since he was Kurotsuchi after all. The drop in the enemy's spiritual pressure was instead more alarming, as they couldn't make out their moves anymore. Not to mention they didn't know much about them to begin with. Barro looks on from his tower, pitying the helpless Soul Reapers scurrying in front of him, as he says, "Only a fool or a loser who should be abandoned would disrupt the unity of a group." That's when Kiraku turns around abruptly to face him, but gets a giant hole put through his abdomen by Barro, or so it seems when suddenly, Barro starts hearing Kiraku's enchantments behind him, as he appears before him and strikes his sniper away. Barro wonders about how Kiraku got all the way behind him all of a sudden. Kiraku at that point asks him if he had never played Bodhidharma, but Barro had never heard of it before now. Kiraku then praises Nano for keeping up with him this well, as she reveals herself from her hiding spot. He then asks her to leave since it was dangerous, but she refuses. Although she ends up agreeing to go back to tell the others to go on without them. Before leaving, however, she warns Kiraku not to die unless he wants her to shave off all his chest hairs off his corpse. Barro then mentions that the data they had on the Soul Reapers mentioned that Kiraku's Zanpakuto had the ability to turn children's games into reality. Upon which Kiraku starts explaining the rules to the Bodhidharma Falls Down game, which was that the tagged person, called It, was supposed to be visible to all participating players. If any player gets caught moving by the It, they lose. But if they manage to touch him before that happens, it's their victory. After listening to the rules, Barro considers it similar to Chocolate Ingles, a similar game in his culture, where the participants could see the It's spiritual pressure and would take the shortest route to them to touch them, whilst leaving a static image of themselves behind so they don't get caught moving. As long as he knew it was just an illusion, victory was certain for him. Barro says as he tells Kiraku that telling him the rules was his biggest mistake. Kiraku, however, thought otherwise, as the game only begins once both participants know the rules. As he explains that the static image earlier was actually a solidified spiritual pressure meant to fool his Reikaku. Barro refuses to accept he would make a mistake like that, when Kiraku reminds him he would if his opponent was the head captain of the 13 court guard squads. Meanwhile, as Nanao tells the others to leave without them, Shinji agrees and tells the others to respect the wishes of the head captain as well, since Ukitake would have done the same as well. Kiraku tries to use the same trick again, but Barro successfully avoids it, marking the first time someone had dodged Kiraku's Kageoni. Having all of his battle data while he had nothing on them gave Barro a big edge on Kiraku. Barro then introduces himself as Stern Ritter X, Lil Barro, the X-axis, whose bullets could not be dodged. He then shoots a massive hole through Kiraku, only for it to be a shadow after-image of his Kaji Okuri that Kiraku had placed there to fool him. Once the game started, it never ended, and so had been the case with Barro already as Kiraku sliced his gun in two. Although Barro rebuilds it the next second since it was made of his reishi. However, in this instant, Barro had made the fatal mistake of taking his eyes off Kiraku, which he capitalizes on by swarming him with shadows and landing a piercing blow. But this in turn leads to Barro opening his closed eye for the third time in battle. Granted to him by Iwash, Barro had become immune to any weapon in the world. He then transforms, donning brilliant green wings and new powers. Called Zillial, his transformed state welcomes Kiraku by putting enormous holes in his body. Surviving thanks to his tenacity, Kiraku then retaliates using the Kido attack Zangaran. Simultaneously, Nakalavar and Ichigo go at it. His poison does not work on Ichigo because of his past stay at the Royal Palace, leading to Nakalavar thinking about changing its composition. With the matters getting out of hand, Kiraku decides to release his Bankai, Katenkyo Katsu Karamatsu Shinju, that immediately covers the entire surroundings in a gold hue and gets felt by everyone in the vicinity as well. Unfazed by it, Barro launches another attack on Kiraku, but suddenly severe wounds start appearing on his body. This was the work of Kiraku's Bankai, whose Act 1, Tameraikizi no Wakachiai, brought about the same wounds on both parties. Then comes Act 2, Zanki no Shitone, where the enemy would get an incurable disease, and then Act 3, Danjo no Fuchi, where the enemy throws themselves into deep water to exhaust their spiritual pressure. Barro tries to escape but cannot. Ohana, Kiraku's Zanpakuto, makes a rare appearance. Unwilling to yield to a Soul Reaper's Bankai, Barro charges Kiraku, boiling with rage. That's when Kyoraku starts the enchantment of his Bankai's final act, Itokir Basami Chizome no Nodobue. Barro's mouth swells, and the next moment his entire upper section bursts like a magnificent golden balloon, and he sinks to the bottom. Kyoraku looks down at him as he sinks, and then takes the same damage himself, although falling down into Ashana's lap makes it all worth it for him. He then begins to say something to her, but the episode ends. Stay connected, like and subscribe for more fun recaps on one and only Endless Recaps.